Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternities, a live discussion on House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 3, second of his name. I am joined here by some very special guests to talk about this episode. First joining me, as always, my sister Alyssa. Alyssa, thanks so much for joining.
Hello, Mark. Thanks for having me once again. I look forward to talking about this episode.
Awesome. And also, as always, joining me, Darrin from D's Reviews. Darrin, thanks so much.
Hey, Mark, always a blast. Alyssa, just can't wait to jump into this episode with you guys and take it all apart.
Cool. So let's start with our overall thoughts on this episode. For me, this was actually my least favorite of the three. Not saying that it was a terrible episode, but I think it was the most that felt like filler to me. The storyline with Viserys and Rhaena going on the royal hunt, that kind of dragged for me. I know there were some interesting character moments, but particularly with Viserys and what it was leading to. But I wasn't a huge fan of how they portrayed Rhaenyra's character in this episode, but we'll get more into that later, I'm sure. The storyline with the crab feeder I found more interesting, particularly the ending. Not just because there's action, and I just thought it was more to me it was just worked better for me. So I mean, again, I didn't totally hate this episode. I thought it was another good strong entry, but compared to the other two, I think this was felt more like filler to me. Alyssa, your thoughts on this episode?
Well, I guess we're gonna disagree on that.
Okay.
Episode 2 is easily my least favorite. I didn't like last week as much as everybody else. I really like this one. I don't see it as filler. I think we kind of really needed everything in here. So, and I don't know if we're gonna really get a lot of filler in this show the way we might have gotten in Game of Thrones because they gotta move that story forward. I felt like this episode really did move the story forward a lot. I loved, of course, the stepstones, all of the action scenes. I love opening up the episode with this dragon scene. There's a lot of politicking going on in this show, so it was refreshing to open up with a nice little action scene to get us into the episode, and then also end that way with an exciting action scene as well, and have all the politicking in the middle. And again, I am rereading that section of the book, so I find it really, really interesting to follow along to see what they're adding in there, and what they might be tweaking and changing a little bit. So I am just really, really interested in all of that, and I really enjoyed all of the interactions between Rhaenyra and her father. And I disagree. I think that I really like. I think the way that she is behaving makes a lot of sense for her character, and I guess I'm putting it in the context of the book as well. We'll talk about it later, but Alicent's behavior is a little interesting to me because it's not really on book yet. So I don't want to spoil anything. So I'll talk about it a little bit later without spoiling anything, but that's interesting to me. But overall, yeah, I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, I think I lean a little bit more towards Mark on this one. I think there are a lot of very good and interesting things in the episode, and I understand the story that we're telling. Much like you're saying there, Alyssa, I appreciate the book ending it with Daemon's story. I think that was definitely the right way to go with it, considering that the meat of the rest of the episode really is, annoying politicking when we should be hunting, as Viserys might throw that out. And to me, simply because it felt almost redundant from last week's episode, where we're talking about still trying to earn the confidence, and am I really going to be the heir, and is this the way that things are? It felt in many ways a lot of a retread of that. And I know that this is dealing with a much more of the, now there's a new heir, and there's the right to get marriage, and there's the different suitors, and I understand those. I think what was lacking for me was an argument in her favor, that in these past 2 years, she has been to some of the council meetings, in more of a participatory standpoint. She's learned a little bit more strategy, that there has been something done to maneuver her more into she's becoming an heir, and then maybe lately that's been lacking because there's the new kid, and that's where Viserys's point is. And I don't realize it's the jump in time, but because of that, that's all we see is, well, Rhaenyra is kind of just whiny and pushy and doesn't want to be involved and feels like she's pushed out of everything. I'm like, we kind of went through this. If only there was some point where, I guess when they asked her about what's going on in the steps, that she had a little bit more of an answer for that, like, well, I haven't led of anything recently and so on, but in my mind, this blah blah blah. There's some elements of participation, of thought, of there. To me, that's what of lacking to differentiate this transition, this arc, really from last week's. Otherwise, it's like the same argument with changed sub storylines, and I realize that's also how the world is, and maybe they're trying to reinforce that. But it just, because of that, I was like, all right, it's a lot of talking, a lot of disagreement, and a lot of miscommunication. And yes, it gets tied up at the end, but last week got tied up at the end too. But I do love the Lannister discussions. I love the relationship between her and Sir Kristen. There are definitely, a lot of cool elements. Her walking back covered in blood, just, I got breakfast for everyone, was freaking awesome. On the other hand, bookending it with Daemon's storyline, yeah, that was all action and all awesome. And we'll dive into more of that later.
Yeah, Darren, you made a lot of points that I was planning on making as well, particularly in regard to Rhaenyra's character.
Yeah, which I completely disagree with both of you. That's
okay.
No, that's awesome. That's why we're here.
All right, so let's get into it, and let's start with the first scene with the name day. And the main thing, like, I don't have much to say about the whole celebrating Aegon second of his name and all the people like swarming up to Viserys McCoy. Oh, what a great king and all that stuff. I want to jump more into what I was saying about Rhaenyra, and I think what I feel this storyline has done for her is, all right. So I have like kind of a thing with movies and shows where the typical angsty teenager, and it seems to be written from an adult perspective that doesn't really take into the account like what it's actually like to be a teenager, where they're just completely shut off and being unreasonable. And I feel like the scene with her singing on the tree and with the minstrel playing the music, and she kept saying, play more, was the medieval equivalent to a teenager locking themselves in the room and blasting music and refusing to listen to the adults. And every time the adult came in, they would just blast the music. And I guess we'll get more into this later on in the storyline, but I feel like what Darren hit on was the thing for me, is that I feel like they should have portrayed her with more agency, like they did in previous episodes, where she was actually involved and actually making good decisions. I totally agree with her anger towards the fact that she feels like she's being supplanted by her son, but I just feel like they could have intercut it with, again, hitting to the point that why she actually deserves to be queen. Because after watching this episode, I didn't think she deserved to be queen, personally, which is not what I got from the previous two episodes. And this one, I thought like they just built up her, especially that scene where she was tuning out Allison and just having the minstrel play. It's like, I don't want to go no hunt. Fuck your hunt. Like, to me, that was like cranking the angsty teenager up too high for me. Alyssa, I'm sure you disagree. So, chance.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that I don't know. I guess this, to me, feels very much in line with the books to me, even though this is all extra stuff that is added in there. I think that, well, as you said, she has a right to be angry.
Yes.
And I think she the reason why she doesn't have agency is because she's given up. She's like, well, what does it matter? And I think we get that in that scene between her and Viserys later, where she said some comment. I'm like, well, you never listened to me anyway, or something. I forget what her exact words were. She's just given up. So it's like, what's even the point? Because nobody takes me seriously. She is very much aware, as much as anyone, that everybody in the realm is assuming that Aegon is going to be named the heir. That's what Jason Lannister says. Oh, well, she can come and, be in Casterly Rock with me because we all know you're going to name Aegon the heir. She knows that everybody knows that. She assumes that's going to happen. So why would she try anymore at this point? Like, so to me, that totally tracks. It's not that she isn't capable of being a good queen. It's just she's given up. She feels like there's no reason to try anymore. And I do agree with you, though, that after this episode, she wouldn't make a good queen. And I think that's very purposeful for what we're leading toward, and the conflict that is coming, is to, I think it would be a little too like black and white if she was like clearly the best choice and clearly the great queen. And that's not what the story is. It's not supposed to be black and white. And I have a feeling that the show will even delve into those shades of gray even more than the book does, where I don't think that we're ultimately necessarily going to be meant to root for one side or the other. So I think showing these flaws from her is necessary for the storytelling. So for me, this is right on track with where we should be heading.
Sure, and that's fair. That's totally fair too. Darren, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was going to say, I completely agree with your points. There are very specific shifts in her process here. She's going to be supplanted. There's now this new person. There's also all these suitors that are coming after her, and now she's feeling like her only position is to be married off into what gives the most advantageous, position for the family. I get all of this. I think the problem is, of the subtext there, it's you're the heir. I don't feel like I'm being respected. No, I really do respect you. You're going to be the actual heir. And that was the last week's episode arc. And this is exactly what this week's episode is, arc, with subtle little changes. And that's why I'm saying, to me, if there was more of a reason why she had been ignored. Yes, we had given you some stuff, but now we've lost your attention. So there was like, look, you had supported me, and now there isn't anything here. That's just the bit that I was kind of missing, because otherwise, yeah, she just comes off as like, oh, you've made a conclusion and you're going to be mad and you're going to do the what did Mark say, the adult written teenage angst scene of, I'm just going to run away. Also, look, I have to say it, please leave minstrels alone. We don't need them. Nobody wants to be tortured by them. We know that's the only reason why they're being included, is to torture the audience as well as the people on screen. Just let them stop, okay? Please, no more minstrels.
I will say, like Brandon in the chat says, poor minstrel, but it was actually satisfying to see a minstrel be treated like shit. Especially after The Witcher.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, like, at first, since I'm reading the book, there's a character who's pretty important in the book named Mushroom, who is a jester. And at first I was like, is that Mushroom? And I was like, oh no, it's a minstrel. Oh, okay, never mind. And he's not a dwarf, really. I just got a little overexcited there for a second. I'm like, oh no, that's not it. That's just stupid minstrel.
To counter my complaints, and starting even off with this first thing, the one thing that I do like actually is kind of Alicent's approach, where she really feels like she's trying to be that friend who's also the stepmom now. As much as she can, and at no real point am I seeing, despite her father's very obvious pushes and desires and machinations, she really seems to be more concerned with what is the better thing to do. I mean, the fact that she even played Rhaenyra, I was also going to say Daenerys.
It's Rhaenyra.
The compliment of, yes, Daemon wasn't suited for it, Rhaenyra was much more suited to the task of being the heir than Daemon was, in a very supportive and complimentary statement publicly, which I thought was very cool. And even in later on moves, she seems to be a lot more supportive. So that's one thing that I do appreciate, that it's not the, oh, now you're the evil scheming stepmom looking for the best for your own kid. She does seem to be still concerned about that, and that is one thing that I appreciate.
I agree, but also that's a really interesting change from the book, because that's not how she's portrayed in the book, and I don't know if we're building toward her eventually changing and moving more toward someone who has a little resentment from Rhaenyra, someone who would be more in line with how she's portrayed in the books, or if they're just gonna portray her differently. And if they portray her differently, I would find that really, really interesting. So I'm really, really interested in how they're gonna handle this character moving forward.
Well, again, trying to avoid spoilers, I feel like this moves more towards your point earlier, that they're seen as like gray. They don't really want you to root for one of the others.
Yeah. So I'm really, really interested in what they're doing with this character.
But and also I kind of just glossed over the time jump. We had like a 3-year time jump, which I did like that. I think that was a really interesting choice, and I do like how they're just moving things along. As you say, they have a lot of history to get through.
I wasn't expecting them to kind of yada yada through Aegon's birth, but I guess what's so important about that? I guess you can just go ahead and jump to him being 2. So I'm okay with it.
Yeah, that was like shocking for me for like half a second, and then once I was, he's 2 years old. Fine, let's go with it.
Already looking so kingly and wise, yes, he eats porridge with his hands, but he'll get older than that. He's a man, you know.
All right, so let's move over to the next point I wanted to hit, which lots of dudes want to marry Rhaenyra, like the Lannister. Now, this part I actually did like, and I actually did totally buy her reaction to this. I think that was the right reaction to have, especially after the arrogant fucking Lannister came up to her. I was like, yeah, I would fucking have that reaction too when she got into that argument with her father over it. And like looking at it from his perspective, you could see like he was like, we saw in last week's episode, which was like 3 years for them, but we saw that he was being pressured to remarry as well. And it's like, look, I had to go through the same shit. Now you have to go through this shit. But then, of course, that's resolved at the end where she makes the point, well, you get to choose who you wanted to. And how, like, it was interesting, too, how the argument was in front of everyone. Everyone stopped what they were doing in dead silence. And no one realized that until what's-his-face Hightower came and interrupted them. They're like, oh, fuck, everyone. And then they kept yelling at each other, even though they knew everyone was watching them. And how she was so, upset that she ran off, and Kristen ran after her. All that I thought made sense. A track that a lot of suitors would try to marry her, but as you say, the implication is that she's going to be supplanted by her younger brother for heir, and that whoever she marries, she's going to go live with them. And it is interesting, though, too, that Viserys's reaction to the Lannister dude when he started getting all pissed off. Oh, so you just assume that she's gonna, as in the way he was saying it's treason. So I thought all of that was really interesting. Darren, we'll get your thoughts on this one first.
What? They want to make a Lannister look all nasty and Is it that hard? Yeah, no. And I love even like the first shot that we have of him when he's kind of looking and gazing at Rhaenyra as she walked by. The king's looking at him like you could see that he's just weighing her like a side of beef or something like that, which is, obviously how he feels like treating for the most part. Also, did anyone else notice Rhaenyra's look on her face when she tasted the best wine from Lannisport? She was like, I don't think she thought it was the best mead that she'd ever had. But yeah, I like that bit. It certainly shows off, again, the viewpoint of the majority of the realm of the patriarchal side is that, yeah, daughters and women are made to be married off for position and placement. And of course, his assumption that, yes, you're going to name the heir, so I will give it to her, and I won't even make her feel bad about it or anything, that she's just been passed over now. I'll make her feel all nice, you know? Um, yeah, I mean, let's just say the guy was really disgusting and definitely not of the marrying point. And I appreciate it, everybody's kind of feel on that. But this also, again, applies into the fact that these two haven't really been talking, when he's been saying, hey, I've been trying to talk to you for the longest time about these suitors and these things, and you are refusing me. Again, it lets me know their communication hasn't been all well, but I'm like, well, I guess I would have appreciated a little bit of a better arc where things had gotten more complicated. Just again, seems more like, uh, yeah, I agreed with you. You're gonna be my heir, but then we never talked about it like ever again, or to prepare you. Even though that was the first thing I said in episode 1 of, God, I've wasted so much time that could have been more useful. I think that's where I get kind of frustrated. On the other hand, they've also really exhibited the fact that he is not paying attention to anything that's going on in the realm. With his denial of even the first speech about the assault and the pirates and everything like that, he's very much his whole argument of, I don't want to be dealing with these politicking things. I just want to hunt the stag, or have it hunted for me, and then I go kill it later. We'll get to that. But yeah, I appreciated all this stuff. Again, it adds a very cool background to what the complications of dealing in this time and period and expectations of the crown that Rhaenyra has to deal with as well.
Well, I was very tickled to see the Lannisters and to see that they're still douchebags even in this century. Yeah, I don't know. And we got the little Stark cameo in episode 1, where I'm just like, oh, it's a Stark. And here, see the Lannisters being douchebags. Although I didn't notice this until I did a second viewing, but the dude in the beginning who's telling Viserys about the Stepstones is his twin brother, and Tywin Lannister, and he's played by the same actor with shorter hair. And so they just used the same actor for both roles. And even Jason Lannister makes a line, oh, Thailand is just so stuffy and boring. But I guess the deal is they're twins, but Thailand technically was born first. He came out of the womb first, so he's the heir to Casterly Rock. So Jason gets to go off and marry whoever he wants, whatever. But yeah, no, I actually I really enjoyed seeing her tear down that Lannister guy. And as far as his conversation with Viserys, I think again that shows like the Lannister arrogance, that he would presume to just make assumptions where there's not been an official announcement yet. And Viserys, I think, is just rubbed the wrong way because he's tired of everybody like second guessing him and assuming what he's going to do. And he's really putting his foot down, like, no, fuck you, I'm king. I'll tell you who the heir is. But I think, as we've talked about in previous episodes, Viserys is not a very good king, and I think that was showing in those scenes too. And he just keeps drinking and drinking, and people still think it's an appropriate time to come and make suggestions to him. By the time what's his name, Strong, comes up to him, I'm like, dude, like maybe have this conversation another time. Can you see he's kind of wasted and angry? But yeah, and I love that Jason Lannister gives us this really funky looking spear, and Viserys' reaction was classic. He's like, yeah, it's quite a thing. I thought that was pretty good too. But yeah, as far as this overall thing, that of course there's going to be a lot of suitors for Rhaenyra. And yeah, I kind of really love that they picked the Lannisters to use for this. So I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I wanted to talk more about the strong guy coming up because it seems like because I do like the interaction because at first Viserys is like, "Oh, let me guess, you want your son to marry," and he's like, "Well, actually, no, my lord. Thanks for the flattery," but he was actually going back to the same point, which I actually think might have landed with Viserys a bit. The same point that it should be the son of the what's his God? What's the dude's name? Valerian.
Lanier. I think it's
Linear.
Lanier Valerian. Lanier is the
Yeah,
son.
yeah.
Who we see later in the episode, which is really cool. But
Yes.
yeah.
And he wasn't a dick, which was great. I was like, hey, I actually kind of like this guy.
Yeah, that guy's not a dick.
Yeah, so and we can talk more about Viserys getting drunk because then he has this rant by the fire where he's like drunk off his ass and Alicent tries to sort of talk to him and he's just like ranting about some dream. I don't know what to make of this scene. Maybe one of you, if you got what the hell he was talking about, if you want to explain his dream or his
with the dream. He mentioned that in episode 1.
Yeah. That was the dream when the kid was born with the crown of thorns and was I don't remember someone even commented like, well, I hope he doesn't try to come out that way because that's not going to end up very well.
Yeah.
Which ended up killing. You could read a lot of ways, but yeah, he was like, this is a big portent, and now he's like, man, I thought I was dreaming the future. I had this prophetic thing, and I'm just like this drunken king, and nobody likes me. And
so, do you think that's feeding into what we get at the end of this episode? His guilt over his desire to have a son so badly that it killed his.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think that's exactly what is happening here. I think that is exactly why he's so insistent on Rhaenyra being the heir, because he has this great guilt for basically causing the death of his wife, for this dream that he had, that he was so obsessed with and so certain about. And that dream is what led to the death of his wife. And yeah, I think he has a tremendous guilt. And I think that is driving his every move.
Well, and I think it's also an interesting sign of the fact that he's like, he makes these decisions, but doesn't seem to really follow up or conclude or just assume, well, he's decided in his mind, and thus it's come to pass. It's like the whole, which again, I did love, speech against the Lannister, and he was like, who said that she's not going to be my heir? I mean, what are you assuming? This is what I said. I wasn't an idiot. I thought about this. So obviously this is something weighing heavily on him that he has decided, and yet nothing has been done to reinforce that. But all of the pressure on him, because he's that type of king that doesn't really follow through, all the pressure on him is, you're going to change, you're going to do things, and now you got a boy, and everybody's just like, isn't he so kingly? Isn't he amazing? It's the second name day. Oh, it's the second name day. You know what's going to happen with that now. I think that's where the pressure, and so he's splitting in that scene by the fire of like, am I caving into the pressure or am I sticking to my guns? And yet, well, you have nothing to support either argument because you're just a weak man that's buffeted by the whims of the people around you, man. Even your biggest decision, my daughter will be my heir, but I'm not really going to try to talk to her or teach her anything. She'll figure it out. It'll be fine.
Well, to be fair, in that situation, it's kind of going against what everyone around him is telling him. Yeah,
sure, but
that's
he
more
doesn't talk about it.
Yeah. But the other thing I wanted to mention is the other suitor that Otto Hightower brings up. That Rhaenyra should just marry her 2-year-old brother, which of course Viserys is like, what the fuck? He's 2 years old. But and that it is ridiculous, and it's brother sister. But if you think about it, Targaryens do the incest thing a lot. But if you're familiar with the story, I actually think this is not that bad of an idea. Maybe it could have avoided a lot of what's to come.
Actually, I have a question for the historians here, because I remember in Game of Thrones there was always the portents of when a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin to whether he's going to be, kind of crazy or not. Is this kind of before that saying establishes? I mean, I don't know time wise. Has marrying within their family a close thing been something followed, or is this we're starting to look at maybe this is around where those ideas started to become more, in favor or
Well, I
in
think what was his
fashion?
name? Maylor the Cruel. I think he came before this.
Before, yeah.
So they may have already had that concept in place, but I'm not sure because he was really cruel, and then Jaehaerys, who was the king before Viserys, was known as the kind king or whatever. So I think the contrast between those two probably had gotten that saying in place already.
Okay. Just curious because it's never been brought up in the show yet, so
no,
I
it
didn't
hasn't.
know.
Yeah. But wait, I was going to say something about your point before, Mark. What did you say before?
About how maybe this could have avoided some of the stuff that was going to come.
Yeah. Well, actually, I actually thought Otto was actually doing kind of the right thing in this episode because he talked to in his conversation with his daughter. He's like, "Well, that the realm is never. There's no way they're going to accept Rhaenyra." He says, skipping over Aegon, because Aegon is the first true-born son, so it's going to tear the realm apart. So he is actually trying to prevent the realm from being torn apart, which is actually seems almost sort of noble. But I still don't like that guy. I don't trust him. But but from his point of view, he thinks, well, obviously Aegon should be the heir. So in order to try to prevent things from being torn apart, let's try to do that.
That's why the marriage proposal, as ridiculous as it sounds, seems like a good compromise to that, because Rhaenyra would still be queen.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the thing is like, I think that would set up that conflict ultimately is, okay, you have a king and a queen, but who's the one in charge? Who's is that the queen consort or the king consort, or, however it would be phrased. And I think that would become a larger political.
I mean, obviously
issue.
in the patriarchal society, everyone would assume it's the king.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, he may also know that kind of Aegon would just sort of just become the king anyways.
I think this is his way of trying to placate Viserys, who seems intent on making his heir.
Yeah, and that might doing it that way may have avoided tearing the realm apart. So maybe that's he doesn't want to see he doesn't want to see war.
Right. So is it a possible good political move? Great. But when you go from, hey, Icky marrying a 12-year-old to, hey, how about a 2-year-old?
Well, they wouldn't get married yet. They would just be promised.
They would be true.
So nobody else. He also said, hey, then that would Rhaenyra wouldn't have to worry about people giving her marriage proposals for a while, because she'll be betrothed for a long time before they would actually get married.
It's got to be what, 14? Is that?
And it'll be like 14, and she'll be like.
Westeros? Okay.
Yeah, let me do the math here. I think she would be like 25. It's still gross, but I mean, you got to look at the time periods this is based off of, and like this is like a normal.
I had to break up with my 7-year-old brother. We were just in 2 different places in our lives. It wasn't working out.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk about the royal hunt, or the other people who go trap the stag. And this is where the episode kind of lost me. Like, anytime they mentioned the royal hunt, I'm like, my eyes glazed over. I thought this whole thing was a bit boring, and it's supposed to be symbolic because he takes this as a bad sign that he can get the white stag, and that it took him 2 times to stab the thing, and that's what leads to his decision to not choose Aegon II as his heir or something. And then we see Rhaenyra actually does see the white stag, so maybe it's supposed to be symbolic that she's the chosen one. I don't know. I like all that. I could have done with that. I thought this stuff was kind of boring. I don't know, Alyssa, your thoughts on this stuff?
I thought it was a really powerful symbolism to show. Like, well, the other thing is Viserys can't even kill the thing with one strike. Like he sucks at even killing the staff that's like tied up. And I think the symbolism there is just so strong. Just to show how Viserys is just not a very strong king right now, and yeah, I think that starting having the Rhaenyra see the white stag. I mean, you guys are complaining that she doesn't seem like a queen. I think that is something in the favor of, ooh, well, maybe she is. I think there's arguments on both sides there. And again, we're getting into shades of gray. Of course, nobody else saw that, so nobody else would see that as the symbol or whatever. But I do think that we are meant to see that. Let's take that as, yes, Rhaenyra would be a better ruler than her father is. But yeah, I thought that it was just dripping with symbolism that I thought I really liked. I actually like that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna shift things here and lean over towards more Alyssa on this one, because while I agree, the whole hunt thing was just annoying. I think it was intentionally done so because the scene where the king like gets off his horse because the guy puts the little stairs next to it, then he sort of saunters all like hung over with this ugly looking stabby thing, and this now big brown stag is like tied down by half stuff and he has to come up. I mean, it was the saddest looking bit, and I think ultimately that was the intention for them to do, because then you do have that scene countered with Rhaenyra where she does see the big white stag, and while the king is like, I've got to kill this and stab and prove my manliness and my kingliness and that my kids, she's the one that's like, don't you dare draw your sword against this beautiful fucking creature of the forest, you fool. And it's a great kind of build up with the whole scene between her and Sir Criston, and I kind of like them as a pair. It's definitely a lot of Daenerys, Jon Snow energy going on there, or maybe where they wanted that to potentially go more if they had done things differently. But I do like their pairing, and I do like the bore bit of her kind of being overly saved, but then just losing it, and that cathartic release of anger against stabbing that boar, because it does.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I did really like that scene for her. I did think that was kind of Kristen Cole ultimately saved her, but she took out all her anger on that, and that did seem like a really cathartic scene for her. And I did love when she went back to camp covered in blood and carrying the boar behind. Everyone's just staring at her. I did think that worked really well for me.
Oh no, I mean that was the kind of topper, is after having done this kill and everything, it was you leave the majesty alone. We have breakfast, and and going back, she's looking all badass, half covered in blood, and even that one knight who I hope we see again, because there's this one knight that's kind of looks like he's stealing something. He's looking at her like, yeah, badass, and then it pans to the Lannister who's like, ew, she is covered in that little filthy stuff. I don't like that at all. That's not the thing I want for a while. It was such a perfect kind of counter of like how people will see her. And I'm like, this is what you need more of, her being like, look, she's being pushed away, but she still walks through camp like the badass. Like, again, I brought breakfast for y'all. I'm going to go clean up.
Yeah, Alyssa, had any thoughts on that whole boar attack?
I mean, I agree with what you guys are saying. I don't really have a whole lot to add. I mean, I thought, I don't know. There's something about the contrast of the blonde to Targaryen hair and the blood that, I don't know, just really works for me. The same thing when we would see Daenerys covered in blood. That's what it kind of reminded me of. Just something really powerful about that. But
murder looks great on you.
Yeah, Targaryens. Yeah. But I don't really have a whole lot else to add. I kind of agree with what you guys are saying.
And it did really seem like they were there might be a little flame going there between little Kristen Cole.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this has been That's goes back to episode 1 where she was admiring him in the what you call it, the melee, and
Yeah.
he got asked for her favor, and then in the last episode she chose him to the King's Guard. So yeah, it seems like doing something there.
I like the energy. I will happily follow that. I think it would be too obvious. I mean, the King's Guards can't marry anyway.
Yeah.
But that would be one of those more interesting directions. But I think you probably have the real trust, the real relationship being built between these two. That's something that she'd be able to rely on going forward, which I like.
All right, so I want to get into the scene where Viserys finally confronts Rhaenyra confronts him, and they actually finally talk, and she makes it clear why she's so pissed off about why she's trying to push a husband on her, because she knows it's tied into her being supplanted as heir. And then he's like trying to make it clear, like, when did I ever say I was gonna? That's not going to happen. And he ends up saying, and I like how she throws in his face, like, you got to choose who you married. And so he's like, okay, fine. You can choose. You do have to marry, but you figure it out. Like, I'm not going to force anyone on you. You take who you want, which is, I don't know, maybe not the most politically savvy move to do, but I think he is speaking from not a good father, but from that place of guilt, as we find. And I think this was part of my issue, because I don't know if I guess it's in line with Viserys being a very bad king, but I kind of wish that his choice to make her his heir was more spun of her being a good leader, as we've seen in previous episodes, but it's more spun. He doesn't give a fuck about that. He's been doing nothing. See, my complaint was not only with her character, but his, because he was doing nothing to sort of push her to be queen. And it's just like, it's just a place of guilt. And I can definitely see the argument that's in line as this character of being a very bad king and not doing things correctly. But for me, it would be more interesting if she was actually showing some sort of interest or good leading abilities that she did in previous episodes.
Well, I think to me it's the fact that he does make a lot of his decisions out of love. I mean, and he even talked about that. He had chose that she was going to be the one out of love, and supports that. He just, again, he has no follow through. He has no backup. So he may be like, I made that choice out of love, but then didn't bother showing that love at any point.
Yeah.
And that might end up being really his real fault overall, is just that inability. Like I said, he seems to make these choices and these thoughts inside, but he doesn't communicate, back them up, follow through kind of with any of these things.
I think you might have brought up the fact that it was again 3 years he never bothered to like make this clear to her. Like, he's just waited till this point.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's exactly it. It's like, well, if there was something, or again, if he had, and then his focus got changed because he's distracted by shiny objects, and now he has a new kid, then there might be this just like, look, I used to go to the meetings, we used to talk, and then suddenly, as soon as the kid was born, I was sort of pushed away. How am I supposed to feel, except that I've been excluded out of more of the long line? That again, that was kind of, to me, what was missing. However, I do like the back and forth. I do like the fact that he is kind of like, again, even listening to his wife. Look, fine, you got to marry. You choose. I'll make that compromise. Again, he does love his daughter. I think that he does make a lot of those choices in the loving and support. He's not good at figuring out the dance to balance that out with the politics. And that's, where all of these complications, I think, will end up being compounded, because he just sort of waits too long to deal with it, and then somebody else feels they have to.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I don't think then he really is doing it out of a place of love. That's why he hasn't shown love in 3 years, because he doesn't know how to be a father in that way. It's not coming out of a place of love. It's coming out of a place of guilt. And I think that's the thing we really have to remember. I think that's the thing that this episode really drives home clearly. That fire scene that we talked about earlier, I think the guilt is driving him. So this isn't out of love as much as it is out of guilt. I mean, which I guess is tangentially coming out of love as well. But it's mostly the guilt that's driving him. So that's why he hasn't. I mean, he doesn't know how to show love like a normal father and daughter thing, because he's never had that relationship with her. He has no idea how to do that. And I just had a brain fart. I just lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me.
Well, I just wanted to point out in the chat, Stress Free K said, I would also choose Sir Kristen Cole. But it's good to note that he's actually not a choice, because if I remember correctly, Kingsguard are celibate, not allowed to marry.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. And so there could be some forbidden affairs going on.
Well, at least by the time we get to the Daenerys era, maybe this is why that law got put in. I don't know. Again, I don't know what the whole history and placement of all of these particulars are, but I believe you're right. We'll just fall into that as a default. But also, Alyssa, I've just got to say, I think you're totally right on there. I think the guilt versus love motivation totally makes sense of why he can't follow up with anything else, because he's just of how he's driven that way.
Yeah, I remember what else I was going to say too. Actually, it came back to me. I also think that the reason why Viserys has never given this speech before, because he was genuinely oblivious that everybody was assuming that Aegon would be the heir. He didn't even, that realization didn't come to, again, he's not very bright. Like that realization didn't come to him until this episode. He was like, oh, everyone thinks, why would people think that? So he's just so naive, and it was completely oblivious. And that's why he hasn't had that conversation with her before, because in his mind, it was assumed. He thought that it was assumed by Rhaenyra. He thought it was assumed by everyone, which was really, really naive of him to make that assumption. But that's what he was thinking. That's why it took until now to have this conversation.
Right. Very good. That sounds great.
So Allison in the chat brings up that pretty sure it's been made clear in Westeros before that celibate and forbidden to marry are not the same thing, which is true. So there could be some, but I think it would still be looked down upon, even a little affair.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't. There's no point. The whole point of this marriage in this world is to create kids. So if you're celibate, then you're not really a great match for the queens or the princess. So yeah, even if you can marry, I mean, there's really no point in it, since the whole point is to like create heirs and all that stuff.
Oh wait, I thought the Kingsguard were forbidden to marry, but not necessarily celibate.
Correct. So they can still go to the whorehouses. They just couldn't have legitimate kids. Legitimate kids.
Yeah, so they can still have bastards, but not legitimate.
Sure. That's always okay. Can always have snow or sand.
So, but that would be completely looked down upon if Rhaenyra had a bastard. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, by far. Oh yes. Yeah. No, men can get away with anything.
Yeah, exactly. Oh jeez. All right. Cool. So, shall we move over to the Stepstone storyline?
Murdering.
Let's get into the opening scene we get with the dragon coming in. Of course, that guy is screaming, "Yes, save me!" Yeah. Stepped on him. It was like I was actually surprised that when the dragon showed up, I was thinking, oh, that crab feeder is fucked. Like, what chance do they have against the dragon? But apparently, a pretty good chance. All they have to do is hide in caves where the dragon can't reach. and then wait for the dragon to go away and then kill more people. And apparently that trick's been working for them. And we see Damon like being really upset, calling, "Hey, come on, face me, or cow," which is like, you got a fucking dragon right in front of you. Of course I'm not gonna come out.
No.
No, I don't think so.
But
Come out from your safe area to where I can fry you, coward.
and then through the course of the episode, the way that they're talking, the storyline makes it clear that they're not winning the war, that they're actually quite losing. I don't know, like, if they, I suppose, like, hiding in the caves would work, but when all those archers started shooting at the dragon and the dragon flew away, I was like, why doesn't dragon just come back and kill all the archers, which he do at the end of the episode? Why didn't he just do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I completely buy that they'd be losing against.
Well, I think those archers also kind of are really close to shelter. I mean, they can. I think they've got a good strategy there. I think the whole point at the end scene, which we'll get to, is to try to draw them out in the open.
Yes.
So I don't know. I buy it. I can buy it.
If you see we lead with the dragons, so they all run away, and then we have nowhere to fight, and so it just becomes that kind of you only catch the little fringes. But you're right. I mean, could you land the dragons and just have them shoot fire into the caves? I don't know how far that those go.
I assume those caves go back pretty far. That's
Sure.
what I'm going to assume.
Otherwise,
caves,
can they still be pirates?
Yeah.
Does that solve the problem?
Yeah.
I don't. You're right. I think they do their best in just establishing the fact that they have the way that all insurgents or kind of small, guerrilla tactics do, is they just retreat into the jungle when you attack, and then when you let their guard out, they come out and ambush you, and that's sort of their way. So, yeah, how much you going to think into it, or do you just go, "Ooh, dragon fire"? I did love. I thought the guy was asking to be burnt. To be perfectly honest, when he was like, "Save me," I was like, I really think he's going to. So yeah, when he got squished, it was like, it's probably the best you're gonna get, actually. That or set on fire, which is the way you go.
You don't have to die slowly by being eaten alive by crabs.
I know, exactly. The dragon did him a favor, really.
Yeah,
like,
either's an improvement. Don't get me wrong. Yeah,
I just stomped him to death and put him out of his misery. There was no saving him at that point. He was getting eaten alive by crabs. So,
also interesting to note just the leanness and almost Asian dragon type that Damon's dragon is versus the other dragon that we see at the end of the episode, who was Lenore's or Linnaeus or I can't remember whoever his name is.
I think Lenore, as Brandon pointed out in the chat, Lenore, I think.
Yeah.
I thought I said Lenore, but Brandon corrected me and said, "Oh, no, Lanier is the guy from Babylon 5. Brandon said that in the chat earlier. I guess I said Lanier. I know what his name is. I just said it wrong. So I guess it's Lenore. It's Laneor. Lenore. Lenore.
We'll go with that until we hear.
Wait, so I didn't catch that. I wasn't sure because I've heard other people say there was a different dragon at the end of the episode.
It was a different. That one was stockier and kind of like tighter.
So Lenore has a dragon? I didn't think.
Yeah, I don't think the show did a very good job of making that clear that he can ride dragons until he was all of a sudden, like in the book, it makes it clear that he and his sister in the book too. We'll see if she also ends up riding dragon in the show. His sister was the 12-year-old from last week, can ride dragons, but the show did not do a great job of making that clear because they have Targaryen blood. Because remember, their mother is Rhaenys, who is the queen who never was, so they're half Targaryen.
Yes,
so they are capable of riding dragons, but the show is just like, oh, here he is on a dragon. All of a sudden, I'm like, I could see being very confused by that. I definitely understand your confusion there.
I didn't even realize who it was. I'm like, who the hell is that riding Damon's dragon? But I didn't even.
Yeah, they did not make any of that clear. It was just, we'll talk about this later.
Yeah, they just kind of threw it in there all of a sudden.
All right, so Brandon has a pronunciation correction. Is Laenor?
Laenor, okay.
Thank you, Brandon.
Yeah,
Yes, we know. I know it's Corliss's son. Yes, we know.
Corlys Valerion. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I heard him say that, oh, the Targaryens have their dragons, but the Valerians just have ships. But then I forgot that the queen that never was their mother, so technically they're Targaryens.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
forgot about that. Yeah. Which is interesting. All right,
Yeah.
so let's get to the big war council scene we get towards the end of the episode where we see everyone basically talking about how they're all fucked and how they're running out of food and they need to do a last offensive, and so they come up with a plan to use someone to just sacrifice themselves so they can draw all the people out, and then we get Corlys's brother, I believe. So this must be the firstborn, who's like more lordy. Is that what the deal is?
I think he's the second born. It sounded like the older one was the one who's like, you're not the one in charge. I think that the one that was annoying is the second born.
Okay,
from what I got on that.
Said to Damon in the last episode that I understand also being a second born son.
Oh well,
totally wrong.
Again, I'm just guessing, I guess.
Well, it seemed like he was in charge, though. So if he's the second born, maybe the firstborn is dead, and that's the third born. I don't know. It definitely seemed like he was in charge. Or was he saying he was the second born son, or was he saying more as an analogy of the Valerians kind of being second to the Targaryens? It could be that it might not be that he literally was the second born son. I think it could be that he was making more of an analogy toward his house being always the second born to the Targaryens. They both come from Valyria, but the Targaryens were always kind of, they were always second fiddle to the Targaryens. So maybe that's what he meant. I don't know. I'm sure Brandon will come in and all the lineage.
We rely on the audience.
Yeah,
it was very interesting when he was like, yeah, whoever he is, his brother was just like, are we gonna really listen to this outcast, blah blah, and it's like trying to like rise the people is like, I know you're my brother, but do not set out sedition or insubordination, whatever he called it, or mutiny, which was a good fucking point, actually. that was like stepping over the line.
Yeah. Oh, and Popeye Plexen says in the chat he said they were the second sons of the realm.
Of the realm.
So,
okay.
So that is more like, yeah, we're kind of second fiddle to the Targaryens kind of thing. So I think it was more that than
okay. All right, that makes sense. And
yeah.
so he must be the firstborn, and his brother's the second. Okay, yeah. So that's why he was in charge.
What I thought was interesting is just how they were setting up the fact that Daemon seems to be the reason why they're losing because he seems to be overly aggressive. On the other hand, the comments also given that he's the only one that's doing something.
Yes.
And that our complainer is kind of like sitting in the back doing the plans and sending people around, but not really kind of being involved, which I think sets up this big challenge as soon as the King's Men shows up. Is Daemon the fault or the savior is he the one in charge of your victory or the one in charge of your defeat?
Yeah, I love how Laenor points that out. Like, oh, Uncle, shut up. You don't even do anything. You don't even fight. And you can see Laenor, even before we see the scene at the end, you see that Laenor is all covered in smut and black dirt. And so you can obviously see he's battle worn. So he's like, shut up. You're not even fighting. So
right. So when they mentioned him as a possible suitor for Nero earlier on, I was like, okay, wait, I kind of like this guy. He's involved with it. He's not talking shit. Okay, he seems like the guy.
Yeah, yeah.
So I kind of like, which is also the only reason why I guessed who that was on the back of the dragon, because we kind of heard from him before.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh, that's right. We saw him talking positive stuff earlier. He must be important.
But, so yeah, let's get to the scene when the messengers show up, which I thought was a really, really interesting scene because you knew from before that Viserys decided to send reinforcements, and he sent this messenger down to tell Daemon about it. So we see here Daemon give him a note, and he was reading the note, and it looks like he's got this smirk on his face. So I expect him to be like, "Yes, we're not screwed, we won," but instead he just pieced the fuck out of the messenger, which I was just like, "Whoa!" I didn't see that one coming.
I don't know. That kind of behavior doesn't surprise me from Damon, honestly. And then of course, once we hear that what's in the note, it makes sense because it basically sounds like Viserys saying, "Oh, my poor younger brother, I didn't want you to fail. I didn't want you to be such a failure. So my big brother is going to come and rescue you." And so he was like, "Fuck that! I'm gonna fuck that." And so after you hear what's in the letter, then it makes sense why he behaved that way. But when I saw it initially, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. That seems like something Damon would do. I don't know why he's doing it at that point in the episode. I don't know why he's doing it, but I'm like, yeah, that seems like something he would do.
Either go big or go home is quite literally what he's being told to do there. Well, no, and it's kind of perfect because I think in his own way, this is Viserys trying to offer an olive branch. You know, of like, hey, I'm worried about you. I haven't backed you up. I'm going to send some people out for you, and everything's going to be okay. And of course, how he reads it is, you haven't been able to do this. I'm going to send some people to save you from this, so you won't be the loser. And
yeah, that's exactly what I think. I think, as I said, Viserys is not a very good people reader. He's obviously doesn't know how to communicate with his own brother. Like Rhaenyra knows that Daemon way better than Viserys does, and so yeah, I think his intention was to be like, "Oh, I don't want anything to happen to you, so I'm going to back you up. I got your back. Don't worry about it." Whereas when Daemon read it as, "Oh, well, you just suck too hard, so I'm going to have to do the job for you."
Yeah, no, that was it. Sorry, Brandon in the chat, an olive twig, more like. Yeah, I think that's 20 ships and 2,000 men, or however that it was. Which again, it is a nice thing, but I think it's that perfect kind of push for him to go, look, there's only one way to do this, and they were just talking about the plan. They need a crazy person willing to, suicide run in order to win or lose. Think we got the guy.
But there was also an element in Viserys, his motivations, that he had to be forced into it. Like everyone had to keep pushing him and pushing him and pushing him. It's like, fine, well, I guess I'll write this condescending note to my because he didn't really want to do it because he's, I can't be involved in the war, blah, blah. Yeah. And ironically, though, Daemon, by saying "fuck you" and getting the job done himself, saved him from having to be involved in the war. So now he can claim he wasn't involved. But yeah, so then we get the follow-up scene where we see Daemon just going in by himself, waving the white flag. And I honestly thought, I know from reading the stories that he doesn't die here, but I honestly thought that he was like just giving up. I thought he was like, fuck this, fuck everything, I'm just going to give up. But then, of course, it made total sense to me when they came up and took his sword, he had another dagger. And I was like, all right, this makes complete sense. But it does still feel like a suicide run.
Yeah.
Because it's one guy against like a whole army of people. But I guess that's the point, because that would make them think that he's alone, so they would all converge on him and that's how they draw them all out. But it also made me think of like a Schwarzenegger or Jean-Claude Van Damme movie where one guy takes on the entire army. But it wasn't quite as ridiculous as that.
He would have lost without the reinforcements.
Yes.
So.
They did conveniently come at him one at a time for a little while, which was nice of them.
Yeah, for a little bit they did do that, but eventually, like, they were all coming after him, and that's when the dragons had to show up at that point.
Well, yeah, and I think they did a good job again of pulling in the attention of what is his planning. Oh, he's going to pull out one, and we have the crab feeder looking around. He's constantly checking the skies. Okay, a couple more guys. He's waiting for that, and it never comes until he just finally basically overcommits his people, and that's the sign that they were sort of waiting for, it seems like.
But the other interesting aspects I thought is they never really trusted Damon to begin with because they saw the people with the arrows were getting ready even as Damon was surrendering. Like,
Oh, sure.
Trusted, but he still managed to, even when he betrayed them, even though they were ready for it, he still managed to outwit them.
Oh, well, and then, they did well. It was the kind of surprise and run. Now you have to hit a moving target. They showed at least a few things where it showed that he was using some of the defensive structures around him to hide behind or roll behind or something. So there was a bit of dynamic. I do appreciate that he got shot a couple of times because it's like, otherwise it would be very much the Von Damme or Schwarzenegger bit. Now, after getting shot in the knee, he did run pretty sprightly up that hill into the cave. But, again, that's a nitpicky bit because afterwards the payoff was I think,
that's very tropey. I mean, that's very difficult. But it looked like he was gonna die, but I was like, well, I read the book, so I know he's not gonna die here. But it did really look bad for him. But I was actually watching this episode with a friend, and we were like, "Come on, where's the dragon? We all know the dragon's gonna roast these guys." And they actually really, really drew it out, and I think that was probably intentional to get the crab feeder out, to get everybody out there. I think that part of the plan was you did really have to hold back the dragons. I mean, it was put up there as a suicide mission.
Yeah. Do you have the dragons fry him as the guy's being attacked, or just moments before the guy's being attacked? It's
I think because I think this plan probably would have failed had Damon not been able to hold them off for so long. Because that he was able to kill so many people and hold them off that's what made them pull out even further and so concentrated on him. And that's the moment they bring the dragon once they're completely distracted by him.
Yeah.
And they're able, especially the archers, because I believe that's the first one the dragons went for. Maybe I think the second.
The second, he did. They did the first crowd around, then they did one strike against the archers, the crowd again, and then did another strike against the archers. So
because the archers was that's what I'm saying. That's the main thing the dragon needs to take out because that's the main threat to the dragon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have to mention Brandon in the chat saying that Damon runs so much better than Rakan Stark. Yes, Serpentine. He knows how to avoid arrows.
Zigzag.
Save your kids' lives, parents. Teach them how to just serpentine when they're running from arrows. You don't know when it's going to save their lives, but one day it might. That's all I'm saying.
All right. And then of course, Damon goes in and we see him going out of the cave and returning with the crab feeder's torso. So I heard some people complaining that's it. That's all we get from the crab feeder. I thought it was going to be this big villain, but I kind of knew he was just a purpose to drive Damon's storyline. Basically, he wasn't really the point. The point is that this conflict that is going on that Damon has to prove himself in.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's interesting to hear that because from my perspective, I knew that wasn't going to be a big thing. So I was curious to see how people maybe weren't familiar with the source material, if they were going to be disappointed that the crab feeder ended up not being, that big of a thing, because they did kind of build them up last week. So I can kind of see people being disappointed by that. But having read the source material, I already knew that it basically he exists to service Damon's storyline. But I could see that perspective, though. I could see why people would expect more out of the crab feeder than what we got.
Well, we like to get the big, large stories, and I have to say, I think there was part way through the episode where one of the, I don't know, suitors or just one of the knights that were in the hunt with the messed up leg, he ends up sitting with the girls. Sorry, nature decided I wasn't best for it. I'm like, why are they showing him? And my wife was like, I bet he's the crab feeder. He's doing that double role type of thing, which was, kind of a funny thing to lift. I was like, they seem to be paying attention to him. Is he going to be important? So I could have gone with that. But I think you're right. He's just there to serve the Damon storyline. What were you expecting? The big sword fight in the caves? I think that would have felt anticlimactic after everything else that we saw. I think it was much better that he runs in and then just drags out this half torso
Yes.
with the intestines dragging out behind him. I mean, it's like, no, I think that pretty much just solves the thing. And now he gets to go in with, now he's the savior of the Stepstones with this army that believes in him. We saw Damon kick ass all by himself and risk his life and limbs. So for all of us, that's going to be a powerful force coming in back into the realm now. So I think, just having him come out with that half body and drop it down and looking all badass, that's what you need. That's a perfect way to end it.
Yeah, and I do want to just kind of jump in here. The person that you're talking about is Laris Clubfoot Strong. He's one of the sons of I think Lionel Strong is his name. The dude on the council who keeps counseling Viserys to marry or to have somebody marry one of the Snake's kids. That dude, it's his I believe second son. And if they're dropping him in the show here, he probably is going to play a role. But it is. He was kind of. I don't know. They just kind. This show just kind of throw characters in there for no reason. But he should probably come into play a little bit later, and they just wanted to plant that seed now. But I think that's funny that your wife thought it might be the crab feeder because who knows?
They said that he was some lord or something, and now it's being like that'd be the perfect way to kind of like Look, we like complicated storylines when it's like, no, he's just this guy, and we killed him, so we can move on. That was his purpose.
Yeah, and that is a game changer now because you're right. Damon is now going to come back to the realm having this huge victory, and that's going to change things now for how maybe Damon might be viewed by. Maybe not just some people in the small council, but by people in the realm in general. So it'll be very interesting. So this was a very, very interesting. See, this to me was why I was not as high on episode 2 as others because I didn't like the Damon sitting back playing a practical joke thing. Whereas this, like, I loved this. This was like, I love this Damon storyline here. And yeah, I'd be really interested to see like what happens when he comes back, and we do see, and I won't get too much in the trailer, but he does come back. Really interested to see what happens moving forward.
I think the practical joke thing was just to show that he didn't really have any direction, and now he does.
I just didn't enjoy that storyline as much, I guess. I really enjoyed it. I really like the Damon. I think that's what really sells me on this episode, honestly, the Damon stuff. Really.
Oh, it's by far the best part of the episode,
Yeah.
I think. It's the most kind of satisfying. It gets a direct line, and everything else, again, is fucking politicking, man. Which, can be interesting, but sometimes...
I don't agree with those who were disappointed about the crab feeder dying at the end of this episode. I like that he died, but I will say I do wish we got more of this storyline in this episode. Maybe saw a bit more of him before he died. That was my own thing.
Honestly, that is going to be one of the things I'm kind of looking at this whole first season as is we are in episode 3 now, so we got 7 more, and I'm still kind of waiting for the hook to drag and start pulling the story forward in a whole lot. It feels like we're still getting the kind of setup and backstory and positioning, which again may be entirely necessary. And I'm not trying to judge it, before things go on because I don't know how the rest of the season is gonna happen. But I am a little concerned that things are starting to feel like snippets as opposed to real chunk over connecting stories. And again, they're doing time jumps and stuff like that. So I'm fully giving it realm to tell its story the way that it needs to. I'm just saying is by episode 3, I'm still like, okay, I feel like we haven't started like going yet.
Yeah, and I don't know. Well, we got 7 episodes left. So I'm anticipating kind of episode 5 and 6, we're really going to start getting into things. I think the first half of the season probably will be more of this kind of putting the chess pieces in place type of things, setting things up. And if they do it right, knowing how the story goes, if they do it correctly, it should be that the first half of the season is good setup and the second half of the season is really good payoff. I think there's a lot of potential for that to happen. We'll see how the show does with that. But just wait and see until the episode 10 and see, because I think if they do it well, we should be able to look back on this first like half of the season and go, oh, okay, yeah, I see why they did that. I see why they did that. And then hopefully the second half of the season, I think by the end of episode 5, episode 6, it should start really picking up if they do it well. So we'll see how they do it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think a lot of season ones do this. In fact, if you look at season 1 of Game of Thrones, the structure is very similar as well. The first 5 or 6 episodes are setting up, and at the end of episode 6 is when things really start to get thrown into motion.
Yeah, actually, I just rewatched the beginning of episode 1 recently, just because I wanted to see how it opened versus House of the Dragon, since it'd been so many years. And I like that. Though I do have to say, just quick as we're wrapping things up, I'm going to go fully in the other direction. I like the Game of Thrones theme being used for the show. I like the new opening. Now my only wish is that they had just committed to it in the first episode and had the whole opening council scene, and then just went into the Game of Thrones scene, this whole opening, and then your next shot was Rhaenyra on the dragon going through the sky. I think that would have felt perfect. So, yeah, I have the right to change my mind.
Oh, and about the opening sequence, it had been confirmed to me that it is old Valyria that is in the opening sequence.
Okay.
It's probably the model that it's only a model.
That's a rare model.
Yeah, it looked old and torn down and not as nice as what King's Landing did. So that totally makes sense. All right, that's cool.
One last thing I want to point out before I go is I've read an article that Miguel Sapochnik is stepping down from co-showrunner at the end of the season. So the other, what's his Ryan, whatever his name
Ryan Condell, something starts with the C. Ryan Condell. Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, so he's going to be the sole showrunner, but Miguel Sapochnik is going to be credited as an executive producer after season 1. Which
so they're not bringing in Dan and Dave to replace him.
If they did, it would be an uncredited thing. They would never admit that to anyone.
But from what I understand, the Ryan, whatever his name is, was mainly the brains behind the show anyway. Like he was running it. Condell.
Okay.
Ryan Condell. Yeah. So I don't think it's gonna affect the show negatively. I think it will still be fine. But anyway, oh yeah. Any last thoughts, Darrin?
No, I think that's it. I actually wasn't even paying attention to who the showrunner was on the show. So that's all news to me. It's incomplete knowledge in my head. I should have been paying more attention.
Yeah. Well, if you watch the you gotta watch the after show thing after the credits, so they have the showrunner talking about it.
Okay. So those are who those guys are. Okay, yeah. No, I've watched the bit. I'm like, I don't know who you are. I'm not paying attention.
So Miguel Sapochnik, the one who's leaving, was directed some of the best episodes of the later seasons of Game of Thrones. So he already had that connection to Game of Thrones, and a couple of the worst as well. But that wasn't his fault as a writer. But anyway,
this is a good passing of the torch. Was involved in the beginning, and was like, okay, I'm going to move on now, and it's all on you. Okay, that sounds fair.
All right, cool. So let's go ahead and wrap things up now. I want to thank everyone in the chat for joining. We're Brandon, Brenton, Allison, Stress Free K. I believe I saw Woodrow Ridger in here earlier. Everyone, thanks for joining, and everyone, of course, watching this archives. Thanks so much for joining us. Really great to have the live participation, and of course, thanks to my guests for joining. If you just want to give a quick shout out to what you're up to and where people can find you. Alyssa, we'll start with you.
Hi, Alyssa. You can find me on Alyssa Jeans Reviews. in addition to finding me here every week talking about House of Dragon. As far as House of Dragon stuff on my own channel, I will be doing after 2 weeks from now, episode 5. After episode 5, I'm going to do a mid-season review / predictions. And the predictions part of that will be based off of the book. So the first half of that video will be spoiler free from the book, where I'll be giving my overall thoughts on the first half of the season. And then I'm excited to do some predictions, because that's what I used to do back in the day, was do Game of Thrones predictions. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. But mainly what I've got going on my channel is Star Trek. I'm just dropped my review for Lower Decks season 3, episode 2, which is running a little late, but it's up there now. And I'll be doing Lower Decks every week, as well as doing Star Trek top 10s every month. So please come on over and check me out.
Cool. And Darrin, what are you up to?
Well, of course, Darrin Jakes, D from D's Reviews, and you can find me on Monday nights here, of course, with Alyssa and Mark talking about House of the Dragon, and then Thursday nights at 6 o'clock Pacific. You can find me over on my channel with Mark, as well as we're talking She-Hulk. We're going into episode 4 this week. Very excited about the show. Can't wait to see where it finishes going with its own little arc and stuff. So yeah, very excited about that. Still in the air of what I'm going to do with Andor, but I usually do Thursday night shows, so it's usually a Marvel or Star Wars. You can catch me there. And Alyssa, we'll be having in another week or so.
I thought it was this week.
This week. It is this week. Yes, sorry.
Yes.
I'm looking at my thing. I'm like, wait, no, that was the 8th. The first one, yes. So
Darrin, you said, well, last time you said Rob was going to join us next week. So it's actually Alyssa?
Alyssa's joining us this week, and then Rob is joining us next week.
The following week. Okay.
The following week on the 15th, because that's when Alyssa can't be there. So, yeah. We got it all figured out. Hey, someone will be there on Thursday. Come join us.
Cool. And if you're finding me for the first time, my name's Mark. Channel is Enchantment of Eternity. I cover House of Dragon live streams every Monday, and as Darrin said, over on his channel every Thursday for She-Hulk. Also do pre-recorded views for Star Trek reviews, that is, for Star Trek Lower Decks every week, as well as Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. By the way, I mentioned my review for Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. So far, House of Dragon has hooked me better. I'm more interested in House of Dragon. I think it's doing a better job of hooking, just throwing that out there. And, of course, I also do other random reviews as well, some Star Trek top 10s and whatnots. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye, farewell. Let me find this button.